Hello, fellow tea drinkers. Welcome to Oversteeped. Today, we'll be discussing the use and prevalence of romance in other genres, the importance of intimacy in storytelling, and why romance, even in high-stakes, world-ending stories, makes sense to include in your narratives. For whatever reason, it's become increasingly popular to criticize stories simply for the inclusion of romantic subplots. Anything can be written poorly, and romance is no exception. Though I rarely see the same venomous hate blogging weaponized against improperly set up friendships or lackluster family dynamics. Somehow, the only kinds of relationships that get this degree of negative attention are romantic or sexual in nature. If there's little to no setup for found family, nobody cares. It's totally fine. Friendship is great, man. Why question it? And I agree, some people make friends so easily. Some people have dozens of friends and have no trouble finding belonging in new places with new people. Others might not be that way. Others, like myself, might only have a few close friends and don't easily bond with people. This is how every relationship works. It's no more or less believable for a character to develop a close friendship with another character in a short period of time than it is for them to develop a relationship of any different sort. There's nothing inherently wrong with adding romance into the narrative of a fantasy, mystery, or other speculative fiction story. Just like how there's nothing wrong with adding a little mystery or fantasy into your romantic plot. Subgenres just add layers to your story. What would a pure fantasy story even look like anyway? A fantasy with no adventure, action, mystery, or the like? It's almost a given that there's going to be a genre layering aspect in stories nowadays anyways. Nobody complains when these components are added in. Nobody rolls their eyes and questions the validity of adding action to a mystery novel or adventure to a fantasy novel. In fact, it's expected. And strangely, friendship isn't considered a separate genre of fiction the way romance is. Practically every story in existence includes friendship, yet nobody is trying to relegate friendship to one type of story where it must live separately from all other genres, lest it be criticized as unnecessary. Why is that? My guess is that romance has always been policed in society. Who can have it, how it's done, how people are punished for doing it the wrong way. It's no secret that Western society in particular is obsessed with purity culture, virginity, and consequently gatekeeping sex and romance to a specific portion of the population in very specific contexts. It's normal for stories to include violence, even to the point of gratuity. Audiences love it. It's exciting. It's engaging. It keeps things moving. The plot doesn't have time to slow down. Characters can comfortably run from one adrenaline-spiked scene to the next, never slowing down, never getting personal. It's never personal. Isn't that always the line? It's always just business. It's always some external threat, some outside force that threatens the protagonist in real time. It's always fast, immediate, shallow. Strangely, these breakneck scenes almost feel more comfortable than the alternative. Slowing down means finally addressing a character's inner conflict, their internal struggle, their emotions. And this is where some portion of the audience feels attacked. Reading about a car chase doesn't force you to look within. Watching a fight scene doesn't ask you any uncomfortable questions. Fiction is an escape. Fiction isn't supposed to be intimate. At least that's the impression I get whenever the topic of romance is dismissed as unnecessary. I'm always reminded of Fred Savage's character in The Princess Bride. It always feels like I'm listening to the rantings of a small child whining about cooties whenever someone claims that romantic subplots ruin otherwise good stories. As if romance isn't a normal part of life for the majority of people. As if it's unrealistic for a character to feel things other than the general sense of duty to their fellow human being. As if romance is inherently frivolous or unworthy of narrative time. As if friendship or family are somehow the only versions of relationships that are to be accepted and included in a story, lest your reader turn critic. Now, That's not to say there aren't examples of poorly executed romantic subplots in the world of fiction. Certainly, we all have examples of particularly cringy or forced romances in otherwise engaging stories. I also acknowledge that friendships between male and female characters tend to be underrepresented in fiction, that the main character is often male and his love interest must be female, that he always gets the girl, that it seems a lot of power fantasies include some aspect of romantic wish fulfillment for the viewer, that a lot of minority groups are almost never represented in fiction, and when they are, it's even less likely to see them in leading roles. But that's not the argument. The argument is just a blanket dismissal of romance in any non-romance piece of fiction. Subplots are fine, but not ones with kissing. And I can understand the knee-jerk reaction that some people have when yet another heteronormative couple is slapped together last minute with no prior development. I understand the disappointment when two characters who have no chemistry are pushed together to stir up drama. It's lazy, and I'm not advocating for that. What I am saying is that romance is a valid aspect of story the same way anything else is. And before I continue, I'd like to point out that aromantic and asexual people are valid, and should absolutely be able to see themselves represented in media. As a person who identifies as demisexual, I completely understand the importance of celebrating non-romantic relationships, relationships that aren't sexual in nature, and characters that remain single and fulfilled in stories that we create. There's no reason an entire cast of characters needs to be paired off. There's no reason a character needs to be in a relationship in order to grow as a person or be happy. I love seeing different lives being celebrated and accepted. That's important. But I also don't need every single character to be written to exclude those kinds of connections. Some can remain single, some can break off toxic relationships, and some can begin healthy relationships. They're all valid, and none of those scenarios threaten my enjoyment of a story. I don't feel myself losing interest when a dynamic I don't personally seek out is displayed or developed. I don't need to identify with every single character in the narrative. Readers aren't meant to feel that they are the characters in the story. Literature isn't meant to be experienced like a video game. Certainly, you can celebrate a character's happiness even if it's not what you would want or enjoy. Your own interests don't need to be projected onto every person. Personally, I'm not interested in parent and child relationships. I don't seek them out. I don't find them interesting. But if an otherwise decent story had a parent and child subplot, I wouldn't feel that its mere inclusion would be enough to ruin the story for me. That's absurd. The story would have to already be weak or poorly written for something like that to completely derail my enjoyment. And if the author has done their job, I should be rooting for the characters to build whatever relationships they get fulfillment from, even if it's not the kind of relationships that I would find personally fulfilling. When I read, I want the characters I'm reading about to be happy and grow as people. I cheer for them, I cry for them. I just want them to be happy, whatever that looks like. Whatever happiness they get to have is precious, especially in high-stakes plots, where they live dangerous lives full of uncertainty. One of the most common forms of criticism I see against romance in fiction is that if the main character is dealing with a war, dystopian society, or trauma, then it's unrealistic for there to be romantic subplots. That it's laughable the young people in these stories would have enough time or energy to care about things like romance in dire circumstances. I find this line of reasoning questionable. It's as if history is completely ignored when these statements are made, or more accurately, it seems that these takes lack nuance. People need wins. They need some good to balance out the bad. Surely now more than ever, people all over the world understand the importance of intimacy and human connection. Real people in war-torn countries manage to form and maintain romantic relationships all the time. Soldiers in past wars have shared their beds with lovers who spoke languages they didn't understand. People living under dictatorship regimes can and do find people to share their life with. Whatever the case, love is present wherever human beings are present. That includes fiction. Why shouldn't it? So, I hope I've given you some things to consider. If you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. For now, I'm gonna get myself a nice cup of tea. So, like always, let's keep the bag in a little longer for better tea and even better conversations. Thank you, and good night.